new, like create something.
You were so excited to say it, and now it's like, wait, how do I do it?
Yeah, wait a second.
Plus the ad. Oh, that should. No, we get out of that in the and then live. Start highlight guide. What? Post? Maybe. Try post. Post.
Don't tell me Instagram got rid of their
Maybe you can't go live for
businesses.
what?
Maybe businesses can't go live.
Maybe not. That's
But I think I can go
wild.
live on here. Or
Yeah,
go
you
live
should
on
be able
mine.
to.
Nope.
IGTV.
Is it Instagram TV?
Maybe. It's crazy. Everything changes.
That's okay. We'll just go live on there.
Yeah.
No big deal. That works.
You can do Facebook
Yeah.
if you want.
Facebook
Still hasn't gone live yet. It takes a moment.
We have
sometimes.
a 20-second delay too on it. So
Okay.
if you're watching the stream at all, you might want to mute it.
Oh, I'm not.
Okay.
Facebook.
I would never watch the stream if I was on the stream.
It's like reading the comments on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
I noticed you changed.
it is going.
I noticed you changed your Instagram handle, Karen.
Yeah, that was, that's kind of an interesting topic too. I'm,
We are live. Now.
Okay, we're live, so let's talk about this. That'll be our first thing.
okay.
I'm gonna go live on Facebook.
Okay.
Okay, start live video.
Same. We're doing it. Okay, and then we'll bring this up.
Excellent.
Full screen.
Okay.
It's almost like we've done this before.
All right, you can't see Adam, so I'm gonna change this. There we go.
There we go. Now we can
Nope,
see.
just kidding. Not allowed to do that.
Awesome.
I'm gonna do this actually. This probably looks really
Okay.
good.
I think we're good. I should probably get a
Boom.
stream here so I know what we're looking at as well.
All right. Perfect.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Well, Karen, how are you?
I'm well. Good evening,
If
gentlemen.
you'd like
How are you?
to take a second and introduce yourself to everybody that's listening to this future, or in future listening to this podcast.
Absolutely. I am Karen Sorensen. I am very privileged to be the mayor in Banff, Alberta, Canada, and was invited by Adam and Cole to participate in their podcast, and I am just going to be open to whatever conversations you guys want to have around being a mayor in what I think is the most beautiful town in Canada.
Well, and not just being a mayor, but being a wife and a mother and future grandmother. Fingers crossed, right?
Yeah, actually, it's an interesting topic. I do a lot of conversations on gender, and people want to talk about women in politics or women in sales or women in. Have never thought a whole lot about gender.
Yeah.
But I do find just the way you did that, I will often start by talking about my whole self, and I do think that's a bit more of a female trait, where I think we're more inclined to bring our whole selves to the table and not just talk about who we are professionally, but
Well,
mom,
and
wife, sister, daughter.
Do you think that that's because so much of your life has revolved around who you are, personally, how you've gotten to where you're at, and I think that's an important part of your story too, right? So people need to understand the facts about you before they can understand you as a person. I think that's a big problem that we see with social media nowadays is a lot of people voice their opinion and you have no idea who that person is. You don't know what their personal experience is, right? You don't know what they've been through or who they've met or any of their opinions on anything. And so I think it's really important to know who you're talking to before you can even start asking them questions. So
It's a big challenge with this job in so many ways. I'm a title, and people don't know the person, and when people who know me and love me know Karen, and they sort of know who I am and what I think is funny and how I present myself. But I do get a lot of comments directed at the mayor, and sometimes it can be it's hard, right? Because for probably anybody in any position where it's public but politically, you're a person. You're not just a mayor.
Well, and you happen to be the mayor of one of the busiest cities in Canada, so you're under the spotlight a lot, right? And I guess one question that I would have for you too is do you have to almost compartmentalize that part of you? Like there's Mayor Sorensen and then there's Karen Sorensen, and Karen shows up here and the mayor shows up here, and do you ever find that to be difficult in your position?
Yes and no. I do like to think that I'm pretty authentic in this role, and that what you see is what you get. Definitely your comment about we are a town, we're not a city, that's a population thing. However, if you counted our visitation, we would absolutely be a city.
There you go.
So we have about 9,000 people, at least we did pre-COVID, and we have about 4.5 million visitors a year. So that's a very interesting situation in this community, that we are home to, let's say, 9,000 people, but our waste collection, how we operate water, the amount of the police force we have, it all has to relate to having visitation. The way we do signs, so that people understand where they are. We have public washrooms that house, many more people than live in the community. So, that is an interesting part of this actual small town Alberta, who welcomes the world on a regular basis.
Do you find like in learning how to deal with some of those situations that there are kind of places that you would model the objective of getting to that place where it's a functional town despite all of these extra visitors? Is there places that are kind of like ideal to look out after, right?
So I'm not quite getting the question.
Yeah, sorry.
If we were more, I guess, try and repeat it in a different way.
Yeah, I'll rephrase it. That was a horrible. Okay. It's tough first time I open my mouth on this. So, like, is there places as a town that has nothing in common with all of the other towns around it, essentially? Is there places around the world that you look to try and model after, I guess?
That's great, thank you.
Yes.
That was much better. Yeah, it's interesting, even when, you attend a conference, for instance, municipalities have their own associations, but so we would be slotted into attending a conference for the under 10,000 population. And, that's, in some ways it is very much who we are, but in other ways it's not who we are at all. So yeah, we do look at other resort destinations. I guess it depends in so many different ways what you're looking at. Certainly from a marketing perspective, our economic development office, which is Banff Lake Louise Tourism, would definitely be engaged with other communities who are marketing themselves. From a municipality and operational perspective, it's not completely unique, but it is, different. So, we partner a lot, I spend a lot of time with the mayor up in Jasper. I have lots of conversations and quite regularly meet with the mayor of Canmore specifically. We watch what Whistler's doing often, again, let's look at this pandemic situation. We were watching Whistler very closely. So I guess if we were doing that, we would look at resort municipalities or tourism-based communities as those that we would have something in common with.
Okay.
All over the world.
Yeah.
And I guess I have a question in terms of how you guys do the marketing for Banff, because obviously Banff has been a staple in Canada for a very long time. I don't even know when the national park was established, really, but I'm curious to know if you guys do, is the town itself responsible for how you guys market it, or is it a national thing? Do you receive, extra funding from the government as a national park and stuff like that? Because I think a lot of small towns would love to, model themselves after what Banff has done and how you guys get your tourism there, but, wouldn't even know where to start, right? And I think that could be a big thing for towns coming out of this pandemic.
There was a lot of questions there, and they were all really good questions.
Sorry.
I really appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about our relationship with the federal government. So we are on leased land, and we, Karsten and I own a home in Banff, but we don't own the land it sits on. We're on a perpetual lease for our home, so that we're on federal land. And Banff and Jasper are the only two municipalities in Canada, and actually in North America, and it may even be in the world, that actually have a municipality in a national park. That is very unusual, to allow a municipality to form in a national park. We were not actually considered a municipality until 1990, and Jasper came after us. So I'm actually only the 5th mayor of Banff.
Oh, wow.
And previous to that, we were operated by the federal government. So if there was a pothole in the street, Parks Canada was in charge. But they asked the residents at that time whether they wanted to have a mayor and a council and operate as their own municipality and take that over. And it was a pretty tight vote. It was not a slam dunk in either direction. But the majority did say, yes, we want to have autonomy as a municipality.
Mm-hmm.
So that was granted to us. We have a lot of rules to abide by, many, many, many more rules than any other municipality. So we have an incorporation agreement with the federal government. We have a management plan with Parks Canada, and the town of Banff has its own section in that. That's actually currently in a rewrite right now. We have a community plan, which we write, but all of it depends on, and it goes back up to that incorporation agreement. And there's very strict rules and guidelines around who we are and what we do. And I think in answer to your question, the most important piece is we are allowed to be here as a visitor, as a service center for visitors.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason anybody gets to live in Banff is because we are here to be a service center for visitors. And sometimes our residents forget that. Sometimes our residents forget that we all only have the privilege of being here as a service center. So that is that's one of the mandates in the incorporation agreement. No, we don't get any more money from the federal government. And I think what's also, in fact, we pay land rent.
Okay.
Again, something very few people would know. So the town of Banff pays $550,000 a year to the federal government for the opportunity to be here. Mm-hmm. And I think most people do think the money flows the other way. However, it does not. Yeah. And Jasper also has that agreement. Their funding model is a little different, but they also pay rent to be here. When you come into Banff National Park and you pay your fee to come into Banff National Park, as I encourage you all to do, we see the town sees none of that money. That does not come to us at all, none of it. However, I thoroughly support funding our national parks, and that's why our roads outside of town are so well paved, and the picnic tables and the bathrooms. I mean, it costs a lot to operate a national park, and Banff National Park is the biggest one there is. So, but again, people will say we're moving into a paid parking model this summer. People go, well, we pay to get into the park. Why should we have to pay to, we pay to get into Banff National Park. Why should we have to pay to park our vehicles? Like, well, we don't see any of that money. But the park does, and that's a great benefit to us. So then moving down to where we do get our dollars, that's where we are like any other municipality, in that we have commercial and residential taxes, which is, and like any other municipality, our education is funded through the province, and certain things are funded different ways. One interesting piece about Banff as well is that when we do our tax model, our commercial sector pays usually 5 to 6 times more than the residential sector does. And that is because they benefit. The hotels, for instance, as part of the commercial sector benefit. But I wanted to move into Banff Lake Louise tourism. So most municipalities have an economic development office. Not unusual to go to any community and it's like, oh, that's the economic development office. We only have one economy. And again, it makes life kind of simple in that way, right? We all have to be on the same bus, if you will.
And it's not by choice all the time either, right? Like we're on it, and we're on it. So
so Banff Lake Louise Tourism is our economic development office, but they operate independently, and they're referred to as a destination marketing organization, and that is their full-time job, is to market the destination. I sit on their board, and they also are funded through a tourism fee that the businesses pay, and that's what they do. But we don't have to worry about, well, are we helping agriculture, or are we helping oil, or are we helping forestry, or are we helping any of these other industries? We have one industry, and we have one organization that's job is to get bums in beds and heads on pillows.
And I just realized too, like they had just announced the payment for Kananaskis country as well, right? So is that going to affect you guys at all in Banff, or is that going to be something that's kind of included in the parks pass now?
No, interesting. And again, I appreciate the question because it's such a misunderstanding. Kananaskis are provincial parks, we are national parks, and there's an absolute difference. So, I mean, of course, as somebody who supports parks, I completely understand the need for a fee there. You can debate either side in terms of why Kananaskis country was created, et cetera, but it costs an awful lot of money to operate a park. And so, I think I think they've gone to the right. I think it's correct that they are now charging a fee for it's user fees, right?
Well, and what I've heard actually was that was a almost a deterrent for people intentionally coming out there, because there's been so much land destruction and things like that with COVID restrictions. People are trying to get out more, and we saw that with Banff, right? And I know you guys probably had a pretty big impact on the town and the park itself when you were not charging for park passes during the I believe it was the 100th anniversary, correct?
2017, Banff, when the federal government said, we're going to give everybody a free park pass. At that time, the minister was one of my favorite ministers, Catherine McKenna, and I can assure you, I was to her directly going, what are you doing? What?
Well, what kind
but
of
I'll tell you, there was a silver lining to that.
What was that?
So one of the messages we were able to get then much more clearly so Parks Canada falls under the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, and but Parks Canada also operates as its own organization, so they have their own CEO, but that is the ministry where they get their funding from. So we, of course, one of the things I'm most proud of in all my time in this job is Roam Transit, which is our little transit system that started in Banff and now then went between Banff and Canmore and now operates in Canmore and now is flowing out into Banff National Park. And we finally got Parks Canada on side with some real funding and purchasing equipment and offering routes because of the free pass in 2017.
Okay.
That was what we went to Minister McKenna with and said, if you're going to do this, we need to be able to move people, not in their vehicles. And we've been working on this since 2010, and you've been at the table, but you haven't really participated, so cough it up.
Yeah.
And they did, and now it operates out into Banff National Park, and we have Parks funds Roam Transit in some ways.
And I don't know if you're allowed, like what details you're allowed to share on that program, but one of the ideas we were talking about for a lot of these small towns, like the Mountain View County area with Didsbury, Olds, Carstairs, all encompassing that is what would it take to have a transit unit set up between Sundre and Olds, and even if it just worked in a circular manner towards through Didsbury and Carstairs and had 2 or 3 buses running, because we know from growing up here that these populations almost need public transit, and if we had it, there would be people busing to and from Olds and Carstairs and Didsbury and Sundre every day, sharing businesses and helping grow the economy and buying things locally versus online, right? And so it's almost a question, like, is that something that we can ask our government about and say, why aren't you supporting more initiatives like this? Why aren't we thinking in the direction of stop thinking backwards of COVID's happening. Well, COVID's here, and it's been here, and it's going to be here until, otherwise.
It's not.
Yeah, until it's not. Yeah. So instead of focusing on the fact that COVID's here, how can we work forward to build these towns up that have been so badly hurt, and these businesses that have been so badly hurt? How can we implore our government to start focusing on those issues rather than restricting us more and more, right? And that seems to be the feeling that a lot of people are having right now, is why are the restrictions still happening? Why are they getting worse? Because they're clearly not working.
So just, you've gone from transit
I do that
in small towns to why are there restrictions on the pandemic?
You're going to have to bear with me. My brain works that way.
I think pretty quick, but even I can't.
Okay, well, I'll rephrase that one question. So the transit issue being the first part, is there a way that we can implore the government to look at more options like transit between small towns and municipalities?
So first of all, I think that's already happening. I think both the provincial government, regardless of what color is operating the provincial government and the federal government, I think every level of government is looking at and is funding mass transit. It makes sense and it's the right thing to do. Certainly the federal government, interesting enough, again, I refer to Minister McKenna, she's moved over to infrastructure, and there have been some big announcements around funding. Roam Transit has seen significant contributions from all levels of government to get our transit operating as it does today. However, make no mistake, transit is very, very, very expensive, and it is not a cost recovery model. You don't even come close to cost recovery. We in Banff have this amazing situation where in our local transit, we can actually operate at 70% cost recovery. That is unheard of. You will never see it anywhere else. Probably 35% cost recovery. So you talk about these small municipalities that need a leg up.
Yeah.
It will cost them dearly. Now, on that same note, however, I'll just comment, I sat for quite a while on a group called Calgary Regional Partnership, and they still exist. Banff is not in the geographic area anymore, so we don't attend those meetings, but they absolutely still exist. They have a new name, I think, and I should know it, but it's a regional partnership program. And while I was still there, they did start a transit system between High River, Okotoks, Turner Valley, and some of the smaller communities. And it's called, well, you may have seen it in town, it's called On It.
Yeah.
And the whole, that was created by Calgary Regional Partnership and an initiative of theirs. And the whole idea is to get commuters from those small communities who are coming into Calgary to work to use those transit buses. The reason I'm still familiar with it is because we use those buses on the weekends to get people from Calgary to Banff, and because they don't need the buses on the weekends. So Banff actually still has a connection to On It Transit. So I think, to your point, the most important thing to take away from your question is when smaller municipalities work together, that is what makes any big project, we'll use transit as an example, more feasible. And it's not just about funding, it's about advocacy, and it's about creating the plan, and it's et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, these smaller communities that are in relatively close proximity, they need to work together, which again, the provincial government is all over regionalization. It's all about regionalization, work as a region.
Have you found, like, in getting some of these communities to work together, there's been an amount of pushback on some of, like, on it, for example?
You know, again, it's been a while since I've sat on Calgary Regional Partnership. There's an organization like this in Northern Alberta, so with Edmonton as the core, and then the municipalities outside. That organization was mandated that municipalities had to join. When Calgary Regional Partnership started, it was voluntary participation. However, that also has changed. So now this organization that exists in the southern part of Alberta is also mandated. And yes, there was always conflicts because we're all there as a group and supporting a region, but we also all have our own interests. One of the biggest conflicts with Calgary Regional Partnership was the rurals. And again, just generically, you know, Rocky View, Foothills have very different needs than Chestermere. And so, you know, there was always discussion and debate around where do we focus. But transit, interesting enough, as a good example, is something that serves everybody. You know, it helped the big dog, it helped Calgary get less cars on the street, and it helped Turner Valley get their people moving. So.
And that kind of segues me into actually
the pandemic?
Well, not necessarily the pandemic, but more so, I have questions for you because of what we're doing with our businesses right now and the community that we're trying to build of independent business owners and small business owners within these small communities to support one another, right? So a lot of my motivation actually comes down to working with these businesses to make them less reliant on government and to create a community that's going to be able to support one another through our resources and through our businesses without relying on government assistance. And I think that that's been something that has been highlighted to me, at least in this pandemic, is that Canadians, at least in my opinion, seem like they're too reliant on government help. Right? Because as soon as something bad happened, everyone panicked and turned to the government and said, what are we going to do? And it's almost like people don't realize that the government is also made of people who also don't know what to do, right? So instead of turning to someone else, if we can help people turn to themselves and establish these communities of business owners, then we almost take some of that responsibility away from the government and say, what is going to be good for the businesses within Sundre, Didsbury, Olds, and the people that make up those communities, and how can we take the initiative as individual business owners to start doing that. So that's what we want to teach people, but what do you think about that, I guess, in terms of just people's connection to the government and our reliance on the government and what you've seen through this pandemic, and how every single time there's a problem, everyone wants to present that to you, right? It seems like, and I'm not sure what your experience has been in this, but every time there's a problem, people want to present it, but it almost seems like no one wants to present a solution to the problem. They always ask for one, right?
Yeah.
And so would you encourage businesses and individuals within these communities to start pursuing that and start pursuing solutions rather than questioning the government and their solutions, come up with a better one, right? Like, what effect can we have on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's always great when people come with some form of solution, especially if it's a reasonable solution. And a lot of times people come up with solutions that just, frankly, just can't happen.
Yeah.
I think we're really blessed to live in Canada. We have lots of support that many other countries don't have. It's hard to, the pandemic is a good example, but it's also this outrageous situation that hopefully we won't see again for another 100 years.
Yeah.
Banff would not have survived without the federal programs in place, and whether that was the people that had to be laid off and then were able to collect CERB, to the wage subsidies, to the small business, the small business loans. You can borrow $20,000 and only have to pay $10,000 back. Our businesses are limping along as it is until we get through this. So I'm not sure that generally using the pandemic, but it is, I get it, it's happening right now. So from my perspective, at my level of government, for instance, our businesses are saying, well, you should lower our taxes, which last year in 2020, we did sit back down, crack the budget open, reduce the budget we went to minus 17% or something. Like those are big, hard decisions. But there were other things, like all of a sudden we weren't offering children's programming, or the senior center didn't have to operate. And so there was places you could do it. But we're still getting calls for that now. And the struggle we have is, while we may not be collecting as much waste or using as much water as we were when we have 4 million people, we still have to have clean water, and we still have to collect waste, and we still need a fire department, and we still need the lights to turn on and the snowplows to operate, and all those things that a municipality does. Pandemic or not, a municipality operates 24/7 and provides services to their residents that you actually truly cannot live without, and that doesn't stop. So it is a hard discussion to have. I think a lot of people, and I've never worked in provincial government or federal government, and this is the only municipality I've ever worked with, people are like, trim the fat. It's like, hey, you know what? There is no fat. It's like, our after 2020, we always look at our budgets at the end. We had $127.10 left over.
Really? So was your budget $127 shorter?
Reserves. Pardon me?
Was your budget $127 shorter than next year?
Yes, exactly. But then back to your question around what do small communities do? It's a big question, but in what you're making an effort to do, what comes into my mind is, and we'll just use the examples you gave, Sundre, Old, you named it.
The Mountain View County area, yeah.
Right, yeah. I don't think I'm not sure going to them individually is the answer. I think the answer is to go to them as a group that makes some geographic sense. So you look at something like, and again, using a tourism analogy, you look at something like the Cowboy Trail in southern Alberta, right? Those are a lot of communities that are connected by the Cowboy Trail, and the Cowboy Trail is what's marketed to get people there. And it's terrible. I couldn't even tell you, where's Rosebud? I just know I've been to their theater. It's amazing. Yeah, like Rosebud has this great little live theater. I took my parents there.
Yeah.
Again, I'm probably a little bit more tourism focused than what you need, because I think it's got to be they have to look at what differentiates them.
Well,
You know?
and a big problem that a lot of these towns have, though, is that they have the tourism that comes through them. Mainly thinking of Sundre and Olds, just in terms of their road systems and where they are. But one of the people that we were talking to, that's a partner of ours, was telling us that there's something like 80,000 shoppers who come through Olds every month and stop at just the Walmart, right? That don't live here. So the tourism is there. There's people coming through. It's just, it's almost like these towns aren't taking advantage of it. And growing up in Sundre, I saw, every summer, our campgrounds are full of Calgarians. The woods west of town, full of Calgarians camping. The main bridge, the main bridge into town,
Crazy.
slammed with traffic all the way up the hill, right? So, we're starting to see businesses like McDonald's and Tim Hortons popping up on the other side of town to take advantage of this. But what you're not seeing is people who understand how to utilize that tourism, and maybe having some advice, and not necessarily just geographically, but connecting a town like Sundre or Olds with the town of Banff to say, how can you guys understand how to run a town. You understand what we're dealing with. How can we start to change our system to be a little bit more tourist focused? How can we provide more incentive for people to come and visit these towns versus what seems to be a lot of the opinion, which is, we are a small town and we're always going to be a small town and that's how it has to be and this is just the way it is. Well, that's not how it has to be, right? But it's hard to have people envision how they can become that without costing a lot of money.
So, yeah, the first thing that would be required is buy-in, right?
Yeah.
Like, there needs to be, if there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
But if there's no will, I'm just going to do a shout out, and I think you should, just based on what you're talking about here, where your interests lay, my friend Doug Griffith, who lives north of Calgary.
Yeah.
Lots
of stuff north of Calgary.
He was the youngest MLA in the Conservative government a few years ago, and he ended up being the Minister of Municipal Affairs. But prior to that, and I think you guys should look it up and find it, he wrote a book called 13 Ways to Ruin Your Community. And it's an interesting book because the chapters, it's sort of the reverse. It's saying, don't paint.
Yeah.
If you want to ruin your community, don't paint. Which really means, of course, you got to freshen this place up and do something about it. So just jot that down. Or so I think I ordered it online again. But I'm in touch with Doug quite regularly. And, he's a busy guy and he gets called in all over the States, etc. But that is what he does. He does strategic planning for small communities, and it would just be a good start. Well, you can also, his website is 13 Ways, like the number 13. And he's on Instagram. Anyway, it's Doug Griffith, 13 Ways to Ruin Your Community. And
well, maybe we'll have him on here as our next guest, and he can.
Yeah, well, he's a great guy, and as I said, he's quite busy, and he's very, I think the pandemic hit his business hard too. But just in terms of what should these communities do, that book just kept coming into my head, thinking they got to go read Doug's book, So anyway, it's Well, if I do a book, I told him I would follow his lead and call it something like, 13 Ways to be a Bad Leader or something.
13 ways to get the most Facebook complaints.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess how much of the social media aspect of things do you like? I guess because we're seeing that social media is playing such a big factor in a lot of things nowadays, whether it's race, gender, equality, just getting your news. Down to pandemic announcements, right? Like this is where people are getting their information from, and there's a lot of misinformation on social media, which you see them trying to regulate, but regulation, typically is not the greatest answer to things, especially when it comes to free speech. And I think that that's something that is a concern of mine, is looking at how our government is actually looking to monitor social media now, and I'm not sure what's happened with that bill that was being proposed, but to be able to monitor and tell us, you're not abiding by the government's rules, you can't say this online, we're taking it off, or we're shutting you down, and we're deplatforming you, right? And it's scary to me only because that can spiral out of control so quickly that once we allow the government to take control of our speech on one format, well then what constitutes hate speech in person? How are you going to shut down a person who's talking on a soapbox on the street, right? Is that something that we're going to have to go back to doing because we can't voice our opinions if it goes against federal, opinion?
My first comment is, I think you should be able to shut somebody down if they're lying.
Okay, so hold on.
And I mean, if you factually know that what they're saying, so you know what, you're entitled to your own opinion.
Yes,
you're not entitled to your own facts.
Yes.
And so you can't come here right now and say, oh my gosh, Banff has 4,000 cases of pandemic. No, we don't. No, we don't. That's just an outright lie.
Yeah.
And I think that stuff has to stop. Now, I get it. There's huge variances in opinions. So you shouldn't maybe be able to shut down somebody's opinion, but if people are blatantly lying anywhere, I think they need to be corrected. I'm going to
disagree with you, and I think correction, yes, or I think less than shutting down or correction, it almost needs verification, right? So
that's a good word.
if there's a person who's posting nonsense and just spewing lies, right? Like the pandemic's fake, COVID's not real, right? Something like that, and they're spreading this and it's doing harm, and you see how it can with groups like QAnon and stuff like that, and how this can evolve. Well, why is the answer not to mediate and say, who is this person that's spewing all this stuff? Who is this person that's saying all this stuff? Should people follow their opinion based on this? And is there a way to verify if this is a fact or if it's not a fact without completely shutting down the conversation? Because even if it's a stupid opinion, it comes from somewhere, or a question, or a motive. And I think it's key to know someone's motives before you decide that, and not you personally, but any governing body decides to shut their opinion down or what they're saying, right? And decide it's not true. Because discrediting someone is just as bad as lying about someone, right? You're discrediting them in a different way, but I don't think shutting down free speech is the way to go about that.
I want to jump
go
in.
ahead, Adam. I see you're going to pop in here.
So I kind of I had a conversation with a friend recently about like how cancel culture, which is essentially the same thing. It's like, if this isn't in line with the way things are moving, we're just going to get rid of it completely. And she brought up like an interesting opinion, and rather than canceling things outright or completely shutting them off, you just put a little asterisk beside it. It's like there's this is out there.
This has been fact checked.
Yeah.
This Facebook status has been fact checked. Yeah. To see any other information pertaining on COVID-19, follow this link instead of deleting the Facebook status.
They do that to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But I think it's there could be more of that for sure.
Yeah, I think there could be more of it too. And again, at what cost to what company, how many people? Like there's social media is really an out of control environment, and that's okay. You can't control everything. Like it just grows exponentially. There's so many people. I think they have tried some fact checking. I like your word of verification. I think it's like on Twitter, I'm the real. So
you're verified,
right? I actually am Harrison Ford or whoever, right? Yeah. So I think that's a good point, but I think it just, technology around social media is just growing in such leaps and bounds. Every time you turn around, there's another platform, and it would just monitoring it just to me just becomes so overwhelming that you sort of have to accept that it is what it is, and that people are going to have so many different opinions, and people are going to lie even if they believe it's the truth. Yeah. That's another thing. If somebody says something not factual, but they actually believe it's the truth, that's a different motivation. Yeah. But just for me personally, I treat social media very, very cautiously.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not that huge of a personality that it's really that big of a deal. I've always used Facebook personally. Yeah. That being said, it's been hard, not only at this time, but I've been through a flood, several fire seasons, a derailment, and I do, if I can post something and I change my privacy so that it, is for the public, it could be around where the snowplow is today, right? Like sometimes I will post on Facebook as the mayor, or at least to people that know that Karen Hunter Sorensen is the mayor.
Yeah.
But I'm very cautious on Facebook. I won't just won't add friends. I won't, I monitor it. And when I'm not doing this job anymore, I'll probably monitor it further. Yeah. Twitter, I'm out there definitely as the mayor. My handle is @BanffMayor, and I kind of get a kick out of Twitter, but I'm personally very, very cautious on it. And I will not debate on any social media.
You should never. Yeah.
Yeah.
You should never.
It's funny how people, who really tries to get to us, like the media will just DM me, because I follow a lot of media, right? So they DM you, and you're like, okay, can you email my comms guy? Like,
they're trying to pull a quote.
But some of the media actually, I feel I have a personal relationship with them. Like, okay,
yeah.
I can, but. And then you asked me before we were on air about Instagram. So I was Banff Mayor on Instagram too. So Facebook, I'm Karen Hunter Sorensen. Twitter, I'm @BanffMayor. Insta, I started as @BanffMayor and held it for quite some time. I enjoy Instagram. I mean, particularly because it's all about pictures.
Yeah.
Like, it's no place to get into a debate.
We're just having this conversation too.
Yeah, and so I had some pretty harsh stuff on Instagram come at me. And actually around, who are you with? It was we had the kids here over Christmas. Eric and Shale are living with us, and Connor was here for an extended period of time. So it was like a picture of the five of us. It's like, who are you with? And it's like, whoa, like, I don't need to come on and explain to you that who those people are and if we're socially distanced or not. So it was actually through those experiences on Instagram that I did. I cleaned it all up. I deleted a bunch of people. I changed my name. If I didn't know the person, and I understand people's names on Instagram, I might actually know who they are, but not know who their name is.
Yeah.
But I deleted a lot and changed my name to Karen in Banff, and I just don't accept.
Well, and I think one of the sad things is, and to me, is that, and again, we've had this conversation before, but is that social media is now a requirement for people, especially if you have a business or you are a prominent figure. Yeah. It's a requirement because that's how people keep up with you, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it provides this anonymity for people to sling opinions or things that they may not even believe are true, right? Just to stir the pot, or for some reason feel like they become entitled to tell others what to do because they're following you on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the worst things that's come out of this pandemic, and I don't think it came out of the pandemic, but it definitely influenced it, was these people who are, self-policing everybody and taking it upon themselves to yell at people for not wearing masks or, based on their own personal opinion. And that seems to be a major issue, I guess, and I don't know if you guys have had any of that sort of in self-policing going on in Banff with people where you would have heard it, or would have gotten to a level where you would have heard of it. But I know that it's a major issue that causes more and more polarization, right? Like for those people who are anti-maskers or whatever, I'm sure that it adds to their motivation when someone is standing across the street screaming at them to put a mask on, right?
But it's funny you go that direction as opposed to the person.
Or vice versa. Sorry,
yeah,
or vice versa, right?
Exactly,
or vice
right?
versa.
I don't have, and again, I know there's health reasons for people not to wear masks, and you can't be asking people that, but it goes the other way too. The people making fun of people and calling them sheep and all that kind of stuff, and then this is all.
But I can guarantee.
I mean, I did post about getting my vaccination, and oh gosh, that was hilarious. But people just come at you, right? It's like, oh, don't you know that's poison? And let us know when you get your blood clot, and like, oh god, it's awful.
Well, and there is a certain amount of shoot, I'm gonna forget what I was gonna ask here. This happens sometimes too. See, I asked too many questions.
Go ahead, Adam. I think kind of on that. Unfortunately, the same way the media portrays the extremes of one side of a story or another, social media, the backlash that you might see from any sort of post, oftentimes it's the extremes, right? It's never the majority of the people that are commenting like, hey, great job, it's going to be like, you know, it's the opposite.
It's the polar
side, right?
opposite.
So
But to Cole's point, I do think in a lot of ways it absolutely is a necessary evil. I mean, and that's probably a really great term for it. It is a necessary evil. But you know what? It's such an inexpensive way to advertise. It's a great way to campaign. You know, who needs a website? Like, who needs a website anymore? Which is just this thing that lies dormant unless you're constantly on it, right? I think it is a necessary evil for lots of people in lots of reasons. It's keyboard warriors. That is real. And I think one thing I can't do, well, I do it all the time, but I should stop. So our local paper, for instance, would have their articles on Facebook, and then the article's there, and then people comment on the article. So there's this one guy, holy cow, like he's just constantly, the mayor thinks this and the mayor thinks that, and it's like it's not anything to do with me, and I never answer, but it's like, man, buddy, like I'll see your name on the ballot, right? Like
I was just gonna say, ask him when he got elected.
But it's so funny how people, and again, there's the Karen and the mayor thing, right? It's like the mayor, and I'm like, first of all, none of that is true. You don't know me, you know. And the other thing that happens, what I've started to do, people form really strong opinions about some decision we made, and often based on a headline. Maybe read the article in the local paper, but all our meetings are, of course, videoed now, and so I just go and I find whatever I say. Well, here's the 90 minutes where the discussion and debate actually took place. So before you form an opinion, you listen to this. Sometimes I've said, here's the 3 hours where we actually discussed, what we're going to do about this. So you go listen to that, hear the entire conversation, and then why don't you comment and form your opinion?
And let's just touch on a minute too for what forming an opinion is, because I think too many people, and you can tell that this is something that's been annoying me. Too many people think that an opinion is repeating what they heard, right? And it's people have this parakeet syndrome where they see a headline, which that's all Instagram is. It's a full day of headlines, and it's Facebook. That's all it is, right? And they they infer things from it. They repeat what they heard without any context, because most people are not willing to sit through that 90-minute debate. Most people are not willing to pick up that book and read and educate themselves on this thing further to actually form an opinion. And I think more people need to realize that just because you hear someone talk about an issue or two people debate about an issue, right? It doesn't mean that you have, it doesn't mean that we necessarily have formed an opinion, because you have to sit and look at both sides of the debate and say, this is where this person is, this is where this person is, and this is where I am. So how does my life directly be involved with, and that might not have been the best way to phrase that, but how does my life directly influenced by what subject these two opposite entities are talking about, and to what degree do I agree with one or the other? I don't have to go, I'm on this guy's side, or I'm on this guy's side. But there's too much polarization in social media and not enough conversation and debate on topics between actually educated people in those fields and people who don't understand why we make certain regulations, or what the safety what safety hazards there is with wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, or how it affects people in that way. But it's almost like it's just copy and paste, right? And that's a big problem. Yeah.
I think they take it down to a very personal level, and really maybe that's the only thing all of us can do is just reflect on how we manage ourselves. And I think one of the most interesting things you can do, if you find yourself with a really strong opinion about something that you have formed, and in whatever way you formed it, let's assume you formed that opinion from an educated perspective, ask yourself to debate the other side.
Yeah. That's a great way.
And if you say to somebody, okay, I really think this, but for 5 minutes I'm going to tell you why the other side is actually correct in their thinking. Yeah. And at least then that tells you that you understand both sides of the debate.
Exactly.
Again, to be at the table, particularly when you're the chair, you're voting on something. Most often I'm pretty certain how I feel about something and how I'm we get reports and we study things, and then we go into the meeting and we debate it, and then we vote. It's always really a good sign to me when my mind gets changed at the table. So I think I'm going in and I'm going to vote this way on something. And then there's this discussion and I'm kind of invested in my opinion and how I think I should vote on that. And then somebody, another councillor, says, if you think about this, and I'm like, oh,
it changes your opinion.
Think about that.
Yeah.
And so, there have been occasions where I've not very often, but I'll go, okay, wait, I can't call the question. I don't know how I'm going to vote.
Yeah.
But I think it's really refreshing. For me, it's really refreshing to have my mind changed at the table, because I'm a pretty opinionated person, and I'm usually pretty clear on how I feel about something. So when somebody can stop me in my tracks and go, did you think about this, or unintended consequences, or if you do this, this could happen. Oh shit. I didn't think about that. So I think that's really important. And just, one of the tools I use, and I'm a little bit off topic for you here, but, if it is a difficult decision, I think it's always helpful in life to have your filters. So, for me, in the job I happen to have, and if it is a difficult decision, or there's people yelling at you, or there's two sides to it and very strong different opinions, who does it help? Who does it hurt? What is the cost? And I don't mean financial. We do look at the financial cost, but
what's the long-term cost too?
Yeah, and is it the right thing to do?
Yeah.
So if I can answer those questions, then I vote. And I vote based on how I feel about that, and that's what you're elected to do. I think that's the best thing I can do for my community is give it some thought. And as I said, those filters sometimes have to happen really fast for me, but is it the right thing to do? Is often the best question.
Well, and to take you to, I guess, continue to this point of voting, this is a topic that Adam and I have talked about on the podcast before, which is that, it seems very prevalent nowadays, at least, that a lot of people don't feel they're being represented within government personally, right? They don't feel that their opinion's being represented by their MLA or their premier. And these are people who are supposed to be, voicing the opinion of their constituents, right? And so one of the topics that got brought up was, why isn't the and maybe they are, I might just be unaware of it, but is there efforts within government to change the structure or to adapt technologically within having an app or something like that to give the general public more power in terms of the bills that are voted on, the information they're given, because something like this social media bill would be the perfect example, right? If there was an app that you could download to your phone that automatically notifies you, like an emergency signal, that such and such bill will be voted on tonight. In order to do that, please submit your vote by this time, go in the app, vote on the bill, review the bill, whatever, right? And have more of a personal connection with government.
Sorry, go ahead. No, you go ahead, Adam, and then I'll jump in.
Yeah, just to add to that, it kind of turned into the term epistocracy, where you have your experts just making the decisions for everybody, regardless of what they voted. I think it would be kind of a combination of that, where you have this bill, but you also have these solutions submitted by the experts on that topic, right?
Yeah,
and then that's
options, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of what's presented. So it's not just people voicing their, far one way or the other.
Well, it would be like vote on A, B, C, or D, right?
Yeah.
That type of thing.
So it's kind of just, and even if it wasn't necessarily vote, but voice your opinion.
Yeah. There you go.
So then people can actually, or the government can then be like, wow, we have this overwhelming majority that doesn't want this.
Mm-hmm.
So engagement, using technology for public engagement, and I think there's lots of people who are working on that kind of app, and that, so we could put out some survey or something, and people can comment and et cetera, and perhaps do it quickly. Ever getting just to the sort of the extreme hole you went to of, here's the bill, yes or no.
Yeah.
Things are way too complicated.
Well, it's not like me to go to the extremes at all, right?
No, exactly. So, it's interesting. So let's a really great example was we did a paid parking trial way back in 2014. Paid parking in Banff has been talked about for long before I was even on council, but we pushed it forward again, and we did a trial in 2014 and did some paid parking in town. And there was a group that got formed, Banff Residents Against Paid Parking, and we don't want to pay for parking, and we live here and we pay taxes, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we said, look, we'll do a plebiscite at the we didn't even call it a plebiscite terminology. Anyway, we'll ask the question on the ballot in 2017.
Yeah.
So there you are stuck with, do you want to pay for parking or not?
Yeah.
Like,
no.
what question do you ask? And you can't possibly get into the innuendos of it. So the questions had to be, what if we only had paid parking in the summer? What if it was only from this time to this time?
Open-ended
What
questions.
if we created some kind of resident permit that doesn't, but you can't ask that. So just using your extreme, here's the bill, yes or no.
Yeah.
So just on that note, we will move to paid parking. And we are what year is it? 2021, so many years later. But the system we've created now is a residential parking permit and visitor pay parking. And there's a whole system in place that residents will have a permit, and they get up to 3 hours a day free downtown to do whatever they feel they need to do. I actually think that everybody should pay for parking in the downtown core, but this was a way to move it through, and most people seem to be okay with what we've created. But putting that question on the ballot, and it was a 54-46, like again, to the no, we don't want to pay for parking, and then we've still brought it back. But so much has changed. We have the new parking lot, la la la. So it's an interesting thing to get, absolutely, to get people engaged. But the people who are making the decisions, that's another term I like to use. I'm burdened with knowledge, and people say, well, blah 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 blah, and you're like, yeah, but this, and this. That because you're not at the table, or you're not in the 3-hour discussion, or you haven't read the full report, or you don't, et cetera, et cetera. I'm burdened with knowledge, and I often find if I'm trying to share that knowledge with somebody, and in my mind I'm trying to educate them on the issues, it often will come across as me defending my position.
But what if
that's a challenge.
Sorry, go ahead, Adam.
I was just going to say, it kind of puts you in that perpetual position of the person who gets to change that perspective. That makes someone say, oh, I didn't think of that, right? So, which unfortunately most people get defensive, as opposed to
yeah, you meet the odd person who's kind of open and actually wants to have the conversation, and maybe they can change my mind. But most often people are very invested in their opinions, and as I said, you're entitled to your own opinion, you're not entitled to your own facts. And often people are missing facts.
Well, and there's a huge problem with people right now, because I think a lot to do with the lack of other things to do, and being stuck in your home, and turning to the internet and going, mental illness is at an all-time high, and so is controversy on social media. Is that a coincidence? Probably not.
I think not.
And so it's like, it's almost worth coming up with a way to give people that transparency that they think that they're not getting, that's causing this pushback on all the regulations and all that stuff. There's got to be a way to just provide the transparency, even if it's not giving them the right to vote on the actual bill, or a consensus, right? Where like I said, yes or no, and then at least if that a stat comes out afterwards, which is 80% of Canadians think that we should go forward with the regulations. Now at least people are aware, hey man, you're in the 20%, right? Don't go on Facebook and bitch about how terrible things are and how this is bullshit and nobody wants this and nobody wants this, because that's your opinion. You can see that most of the country does want this. So,
well, and, again, what's that saying? Democracy may not be a great form of government, but it's all we've got. And, I think that's the other point when you elect people.
Yeah.
So I got elected, the other guy didn't.
Well, this is why it's so important to vote. And
yeah,
right?
But the other guy thinks very differently than I do about lots of things. So do your supporters, other guy?
Yeah.
And the people who are still whatever, I I actually got elected. So my values, my decisions are going to come forward because I actually got elected. I just had another thought because this is something I'll say to people too. We'll get, so we try all we can to get public engagement, you know, surveys and some online stuff and newsletters and do this and public hearings and public input and here's how you do this and here, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I just had one the other day where it's like, I forget what it was on trail lighting or something. And it's like, I sent you a letter and I told you that I didn't think that that was a good idea because of this, this, and this. And you didn't listen and you voted the way you voted anyway. And it's like, so I have been in a position to say to people, because it's like, if the things don't go the way that somebody thinks that they want it to, then it's like you didn't listen.
Yeah.
No, I did listen. I heard you. I disagree with you. And I have a vote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, just because something doesn't go your way, you can't assume your politicians didn't listen to you or didn't hear you. I fully imagine they heard the other perspective or the other 30 perspectives. But whoever voted, more people who were voting disagree with you.
Yeah.
And voted another way. So again, I love that. You didn't listen. You know, I promise you I did. Loud and clear, man. I got it.
Yeah.
But I'm going to vote the other way because I don't agree with your thinking on that.
Yeah.
Well, and to your point about, you know, just to use the example of parking in Banff, like the fact that took 20 years to decide that whether you were going to be allowed, you know, paid parking in Banff, right? Isn't that a red flag to say that maybe our democratic process needs to be evolved somehow, right? Like democracy seems to be the only thing that hasn't evolved since it was created. And what do we tell everybody? What do we tell people and businesses? Improve or you die, right? Improve or you stop. And democracy is not working very well in the United States. It's not working very well in Canada right now. Like, and to me, when I think of democracy, like I don't think of policemen showing up at a church because people are not abiding by regulations that they get fined for, right? Like that video that went viral of those 200 SWAT officers in Edmonton going to that church where people were, you know, in there with their masks off, right? Like that needs to be dealt with completely differently, in my opinion. And I think that
tell me about how.
It shouldn't be dealt with, I don't think, in the moment. I think it should be dealt with in terms of, and I'm not a politician, so you'll be able to shut me down here probably pretty easily. But in my opinion, it should be recorded, noted, who the people who are offending, right? Like send someone.
I'm just gonna keep challenging you here. How should they do that? Who should go in and get a piece of paper and ask people to please give them their name and address?
Okay, so then maybe this isn't the issue. Maybe the response isn't the issue, right? Maybe we're pointing the flame, or sorry, the fire extinguisher at the tip of the flame instead of the base, right?
Yeah,
so what's the problem? Well, the problem is that this religious institute didn't want to abide by the regulations, right? So what is the government response to not following regulations? Fine people, right? You fine them. So why was the church not, well, I'm sure they were fined eventually, but why were they not just fined and, hey, you're breaking the rules, here's the punishment according to the government, here is your punishment. Not, we're going to send in, you want to be extreme? Fine, we'll be extreme. Here's our SWAT team to come and break up your Sunday church. Because that, to me, is fighting fire with fire. That's not aiming a fire extinguisher at the situation at all. So
okay, so let me just take it down a level for you. So we have a social gathering of 15 kids in somebody's house.
Okay.
Call the RCMP.
Mm-hmm.
They're, they're breaking the rules. They are putting human safety at risk. I have a spike in this community, and they are in a situation to spread this virus further. So we call the RCMP, and the RCMP go to the house, and they talk to everybody there, and you're right, I mean, there's no violence or anything like that, but you're right, people get fined, but you have to call those who can enforce, and I know it's a strong word, but that's what it is. It's enforcing the rules, enforcing the laws, enforcing the regulations. I'm not going to go over to the house and try and enforce or have a conversation. I'm going to call the RCMP and say, there's 20 people over there in that house, and the regulations currently say, can you go over and throw some tickets around, please, and charge a couple of people $1,200? And that's what happens.
Yeah.
Can I jump in? Yeah. I think when you say pointing the fire extinguisher at the tip of the flame, it goes even deeper than that, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, how people feel underrepresented, and if they could see like, oh, we are in the minority of people that have voted for these restrictions. It's like, okay, I get it. The rest of the country or the rest of the population has decided this is good. Maybe they will be less likely to break the rules because they understand that the rules have been chosen or shown.
That isn't what we've seen on this, is it? What we've seen is that people who feel very strongly a different way continue to put their point forward, and in fact, gather other believers in the same way, and create this, create masses of people who feel differently. And you know what? Again, the whole you can, I don't know. The pandemic's just such a weird thing to talk about. But yeah, you can have your own opinion, and you can have your own beliefs, and you can have thousands of other people who believe like you do. But if you live in a society, or live in a world, or live in a town, or live in a country, we do operate by laws and by rules. And again, maybe we shouldn't, but that's what we've got right now. And so
I want to add one more thing to that. I think maybe part of the reason people feel so underrepresented goes back to the social media issue we were talking about, how the algorithms are so directed towards,
you're only seeing the worst of the worst.
You're only seeing what you are most inclined to, right? So if I go on social media and I see all of my friends that also want to go to church despite the rules and regulations, it'll feel like everybody feels this way about this, so it's like we're just going to do it, even though the majority are feeling the opposite, right? So I think there's like a compounding effect between feeling underrepresented by the restrictions pulled out or shown by the government, and also because we feel like everybody around us is on our side, So
absolutely.
I think it kind of makes the problem. It kind of exasperates the problem a little bit too. So it's
you can find people to support your point of view.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's about, giving your baby a soother or not. Like whatever it is, you want to find people who support you, or Google it, and you will find all the support in the world you need for any of your beliefs, and then you can find the opposite as well. And so it's the world's more complicated, and it will continue to get more complicated, I'm sure.
I want to take it down a different road here. So this, I think on the initial slide of this or whatever, it was lessons in leadership.
Yeah,
we should probably ask a little bit
get to our
that.
Conversation topic. Yeah.
We seem to do that. We're like, oh yeah, we're going to talk about this today.
But that's what you're trying to create, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess for me, like you're especially talking about bringing communities together and stuff. Is there anything that has stood out to you being a community leader over the last 3 terms, that you kind of feel that people that are trying to build a community and bring a community together, that I guess that stood out to you? Anything in particular?
Oh wow. And again, not my brain's going in about 5 different directions. I guess the question is, sorry, just rephrase it so I can narrow my thoughts down.
Okay. So if, say, we wanted to build a community in Mountain View County, are there specific things that we should be focusing on?
Okay, that's well
leaders?
stated, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I guess, first of all, and I said this a little earlier, it's finding buy-in, which isn't so different than the conversation we were in a minute ago, right? It's about finding minded individuals who then become a group, who then become an effort, who then want to move forward. So I think if people like you guys want to go in and talk to more rural or small communities in your province of Alberta and try and find out how to help them, I think your first step is to find like-minded people in that community. The other,
like this?
the other part is, you know, to always make sure that you are listening clearly. Like, instead of going down a road and thinking, here's what's going to help you be this or this or this, you know, it's like, well, what if they don't want to be that or that? So I think it's getting the grasp on what do you want to be, and then again, when you start talking about community, you're back to so many different ideas. But if we take the conversation back to the app or to the survey or to the yes or no, you know, I think you're talking actually about community engagement.
Yeah.
And that is a real, believe me, a real challenge. It's so interesting. I think a lot about, I have to get this right, the silent majority and the vocal minority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can assure you, if there is something coming to council that, paid parking, I'm trying to think of another one.
The train station. Or that was paid for privately, wasn't it?
You know what's before us here coming pretty quickly? The train whistle.
Okay.
There's like people who've decided, so I love the train whistle. I love it. I don't hear it. I hear it at 4 o'clock in the morning. I love it. But there's people who think that we should now be silencing the train whistle in town. But anyway, I'm trying to go back to experience. The gallery, in a day when we had a gallery, when we were at a council table and we were in a room and people could come to the council meeting, the room is full of people who don't want something, which means there's 40 or 50 people.
Yeah.
Where's the other 900?
Yeah.
You know, so that silent, what is it? Silent majority, vocal minority is a real thing. And so bringing it back to you guys, that's why engagement and actually getting a real picture of what do people want? What does the community want? What do they want to be? How do they see themselves? And again, in Banff, we just are so blessed with this history of we are what we are and we'll actually never be anything else because we're not allowed to be anything else. And, you know, I've spoken at, I was speaking at a conference which was a lot of ski destinations and some from the Jackson Hole and Telluride and some of the American ones. And, you know, they're really dealing with, well, the communities around us are growing and we're getting so big and, you know, the community doesn't want it to look like that and and we don't have enough water for these communities and housing is getting under control in terms of pricing and you know, I'm speaking going, you see, that horse never left our barn.
Yeah.
You know, we've never been allowed to grow. We're on a set footprint. We have a commercial cap. You can't just come and buy a timeshare here. You can't live here unless you have a need to reside. And so, you know, Banff as an entity in that way is unique, other than Jasper. And therefore it makes other communities, it makes it hard to relate us.
But you can use you guys as an example too, right? Like, you're so closely tethered to tourism and to the Canadian government that, like you even said earlier, without their assistance through this pandemic, Banff would have been kaput. It would have been done. And so absolutely. that's almost the opposite side of, like, being a downside of that, right? Like, you can't expand and you can't look at other industries to help the town get along. So.
You're right. One industry, you know, I spent a lot of time with the mayor of Canmore, and you know, that's a very interesting community, right? They were for a long time really focused on second home ownership. They're definitely a tourism community, but there's also people that have lived there for 50 years and, you know, have a lot to say about what they say is happening to their small town. So I guess you asked me a question a while ago. I can't even remember what the question was, but I know. Let me take you back there. So I think it's more around, if you guys are going to go in and want to help communities, I think it's just to hone your skills of engagement and try and research as many tools as you can that are out there for public engagement, because it is hard. And, cool, people will often say to us, again, well, I didn't know you were voting on that. Well, then there's this other piece of, okay, take some responsibility.
Yeah.
The agendas are posted every week. Like, we can't, sometimes we do put flyers on individual doors because we're a small enough town to do that if it's about something that is very specific to this neighborhood or this street.
Yeah.
But I can't go around town and put a flyer in everybody's door because next week we're going to be talking about this. Like, again, I think that's another real human trait. You're smart human beings. You've got a brain. You know how to use a keyboard. Like, go find out what you're interested in. If it's like, well, I didn't know you were talking about that. Well, I can't help that.
Yeah.
I can't phone you all and go this week on the agenda.
And to your point about needing to have that community aspect where there's community engagement, that's something that we have been focusing on already as we build this community, because if there is no community engagement, then there's no community, right?
Right.
And so a big part of the engagement piece that we're looking at is having a community initiative. And I find that having a goal for a group of people seems to be the best way to get everyone on the same page, right? And it goes back to, you can use the Reagan speech when he retired from office, which was if we had an enemy to fight from outer space, the world would never be more together, right? Because we have a common goal, a common opposite. Right now, a big problem that we're facing is that we don't have a common nemesis. We are each other's common problem, right? And so each individual is against every individual, and every group is against every group, because we don't have that. And we almost need to provide a project for people to work on. Like, for example, what we're doing with our business community is making an effort to work with mental health institutes within the province right now, and how we can help them through our business, right? We don't know how, we have discussions coming up with a pretty prominent one. It's called Thumbs Up Foundation. They're based out of Airdrie. And all we did was reach out to them and say, hey, we want to do this community initiative. We have, 8 businesses that are all interested in working with you guys in some way, shape, or form and helping. We don't know how, we don't know what that's going to look like, but we want to help, right? And so how can you incentivize communities of people, like real communities, like Banff, like Calgary, or even bigger communities like Alberta and province-wide, to work towards a collective goal, right? Like, you kind of saw that at the beginning of the pandemic with, lessen the curve, right? Like, that was kind of, we're all in this together, that whole thing. Well, that faded very quickly because the objective disappeared, because we lessened the curve on cases, and then we lessened the curve on deaths, and then it went back up, and then it went back down, and now people are just all over the place, right? And if we had a goal to work towards as a community, would that not help with this turmoil and give people an end in sight? Like, why is that not more of a priority for government bodies?
Well,
rather than saying, don't do all this stuff, it's incentivize people to do something that's going to take us closer, versus telling people not to do something that clearly is not worked the best.
Yeah, the whole carrot stick thing.
Exactly.
Carrot stick. So again, going back to your earlier comment about what you guys are trying to create,
We've lost.
And I do think there is value in, keeping it controllable for you, right? Like as you said, you've got these 8 businesses, and going to this one organization and doing some good.
Yeah.
And I think that's admirable. Using the pandemic as an example, or even did you say that was a Reagan quote? If we had a common enemy?
Yeah, I think it was Reagan when he left office.
You know what? When I hear that now, because when I look at what's happened to the pandemic, would we? Or would half the world or some of the world be going, well, no, we should let them in.
And side with, yeah.
No, you know what? Maybe they're a rare species. We should save them. Maybe we need to go there. Again, I'm not sure anymore. If this pandemic has not been a global enemy,
Yeah.
But
and
what
yet
ab-
we
what about the world
still
wars,
are
though?
divided.
Like, what about the world wars as an example, right? And was,
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, there was Axis and allies even in that, right? Like, there
Yeah.
was Italy and stuff like that were on the side of the Germans. Well,
Yeah.
but what I find is that the majority of people will side with the side that is right, inherently right, because we all have that thermostat in us, whether we want to admit it or not.
Is it the right thing to do?
Yeah, is it the right thing to do, right? And so if we see an enemy that is obviously a threat come from somewhere, most people, and I don't think, and when I say this, like even with the World War example, was it really the Italian people who were on the side of the Germans, or was it Mussolini, right? The individual who was on the side of Hitler. So it comes down to our leaders who are there, and it comes down to how the population's being represented. Because if Mussolini is running a dictatorship and saying, hey, we're going with the Germans, well, that's one person, right? That's not necessarily the majority. That might be one person who's being influenced by their own motives. The same people who would say, oh, well, we should let them in and let them be our friends or whatever. Maybe they're incentivized by their own, opinion and what's been happening in terms of their life experience with aliens or whoever this common enemy would be, right? And you have to account for that, I think, the pushback, but I think we also have to realize that either the pushback will be majority or the people on the side of the governing body will be the majority, right? And at that point, it's easier to decide. But if you can't tell what the majority is because everyone's just voicing their own opinion based on this or that, then it's harder for people to understand and make decisions that affect the whole, right? So I guess I'll try to phrase that into a question and say, if we had a common goal as a, let's say, global goal, right? Let's say, have you seen Seaspiracy?
No.
The new Netflix documentary. So it was made by the same people who made Cowspiracy, which is on the industrial farming industry.
Mm-hmm.
But this was on the oceans and the industrial fishing industry and what's happening with that. And it's opened a lot of people's eyes to how detrimental the fishing industry has been on the Earth's health, like overall, right? In terms of the giant nets they're dragging and the Pacific garbage patch, right? So something like that's not a human entity, that can't be divided. A floating patch of plastic garbage in the ocean that's miles wide is inherently bad. That's inherently terrible. Nobody's going, hell yeah, let's go party on that garbage island, right? Like people, why are we not incentivized to go, hey, this is a major issue for everyone on Earth. It's going to affect everybody. Let's start addressing this. Let's start addressing the landfill problem, right? And all the stuff that we do with our garbage. And there was a recent person who came out, I can't remember her name. She was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and she came out saying that, it's now well known throughout the scientific community that petroleum products, any petroleum product, has a certain chemical, and I can't remember what it is in it, but it's prominently this one chemical that leaches into our food, our water, our like every product we use that touches or is around certain types of plastics and petroleum products gets this chemical in it, and this chemical lowers men's sperm count and their reproductive ability by 50% within 3 generations. So if I eat, these foods with plastic and get a bunch of these chemicals in me, my children will have 50% less, my grandchildren will have 50% less of a chance to have children than I did, because they're 50% lower sperm count. So this is an issue for everybody, right? And it's like, why are we talking about, and don't get me wrong, race, gender, all of this stuff is very, very important. It's to individuals, right? But the stuff that's affecting all of us, the garbage patch, chemical chemicals leaching into our food.
How about the big one of climate change?
Climate change, the landfill issue, like there's all these issues that are plaguing the earth that we seem to be avoiding as a public population, where we'd rather just focus on things that we really have no say over, which is gender, race, and that, how we're born with those, right? Why can't we make those a focus? Why can't the Canadian government come forward and say, citizens of Canada, what do you guys think about this? How can we start addressing this issue? How can we as a country step forward and set an example for other countries and say, we're not going to let that garbage patch float out there and ruin all the environment off our coasts and kill millions of species of animals and stuff like that people really care about, because that's an issue, right? Like how could we put focus on issues we actually can do something about physically versus a lot of topics like gender, race, and things like that we really have no influence over?
So first of all, I think that, and not knowing how much research you've done, I think that most levels of government, particularly at a federal level, are looking very seriously at all of those things you just mentioned.
But we don't hear about that, right?
Well, that's not, again.
Is that for us to do that? Yeah.
To go find out what's happening and to understand what policies have been put in place. It's funny, again, when you talk about why can't we, I'm with you, why can't we as a world, just for heaven's sakes, deal with this climate change issue? I'll tell you why. Because there's people who don't believe it's real. So it doesn't matter, again, whatever you talk about, maybe there are people who think that partying on the garbage patch would be a good idea. That's the world we live in.
But again,
you're going to drive yourselves crazy, and it's inspirational to see people at your age saying, we want to make a big difference. We want to do something big. But my best advice to you is to look at yourself, truly see what you can do. And, again, whether it's mental health or climate change, whatever community you create, first of all, find your cause, because, you're very passionate about a lot of different things that are going on. But if you want to be leaders in this, you're going to have to be focused. You're going to have to figure out what you want to focus on and then lead people to come with you. But if you're talking about Mussolini and climate change and mental health...
That's just my ADD, Karen. It has nothing
I know, but seriously, if you're trying to create community and you're trying to get people of like mind to join whatever it is, efforts that you want to put together, you're going to have to be crystal clear. And it doesn't mean that you can't have all kinds of causes and thoughts and stuff going on, but if you're trying to create a community around something, you first and foremost have to decide what that is going to be.
Yeah.
And then people will follow you.
And I think that's on me for misphrasing that, but those aren't necessarily our goals as a community, like what I was using as an example there.
Right.
But what I was trying to state is that there are plenty of examples of things that we could use as goals for the global population, right? Mm-hmm. And how we can start to move towards those things, physical things that people can't, if people want to deny that there's a garbage patch, I don't know who would, but I'm sure there would be people that would do that, like fishing industry people, whatever.
Flat earthers.
Yeah,
so.
there are
right.
people
And
that
again,
believe that
I mean, even climate change, it's like, Canada may not be doing enough, maybe it's trying to do more, but until other countries in the world, again, when you talk globally, there's just culturally so many different belief systems out there. And if Southeast Asia is going to continue to dump waste into the ocean, and Canada's over here trying to, do what they can do, I think that's all Canada can do, is do what they can do to play their part to do the best. But man, it's hard to think about global issues and solving them as a united world.
Well, and I think that the thing is, sorry, I keep cutting you off.
No, that's okay.
I think the thing is that people are aware of these issues, and we say, Canada is doing this and Canada is doing that. Well, Canada's not, right? The individual people are not doing something. The
Well,
government,
I don't know how you can say that. That's such a general statement.
Because
like,
I would
what?
say,
I recycle. What do you like?
Okay.
well, I'd say let's say recycling, okay? Majority of people recycle their cans, I would say, right? How many people actually understand what happens past putting that can in the recycling bin, right? And again, it comes to us to educate ourselves and
here's another
figure
point.
that out.
Bring me data.
Yes.
Do not bring me anecdotes.
Okay.
I don't mean in this conversation.
Yeah.
I mean
Just
in my
general.
job.
Yeah.
When administration can bring me data, when they can tell me how many cars a day are coming in and out of this town, and I get to make a decision on traffic flow because I've got real data in front of me instead of somebody going, do you know it took me an hour and a half to get from my house across the bridge? And I can go and I can say, well, actually, what time was that and what day?
Yeah.
It was Saturday. What time? Around 2 o'clock. No, you know what? It was traffic flow was moving at 15 minutes from point A to point B. So your hour and a half is a little bit off because I've got data right here that tells me that you're inflating the situation. So just when you are making, frankly, assumptions about how much Canadians know about recycling or not, you could very well be right.
Yeah.
But you can't, again, make general statements without,
Yeah.
that's your belief.
Yes.
I think,
Okay.
you know, the share your sources is a big thing. But one thing I want to go back to, I think, again, it's like we see a lot of these issues and we constantly see them because that's what, you know, we care about one thing once and all of a sudden the algorithms are just pushing them at us. So whether we believe, you know, nothing is being done about a lot of these things,
or a lot of things are being
or
done
not,
now.
or a lot of things are being done, right? It's the chances are it's probably not that
Somewhere
extreme,
in the
right?
middle.
So we just don't see, you know, we don't necessarily see the data that we probably need to see, and that's why we
or know where to find it, right?
That's why a lot.
Well,
that's why
I don't know,
creating
have you read, I
assumptions.
haven't, have you read Canada's climate change plan? I haven't read it, have you? Okay, so
No.
maybe that's it, you know, like if you want to know what Canada's doing in climate change, you
Yeah.
gotta go read the document and understand what goals have been set, when they were set, where we're at on the goals, what they plan to
but
meet
to
them
that
by.
point, you know, I'm not working for the government. So why is it my responsibility to read the government policies, understand them, and then form an opinion when I have people that are supposed to be the leaders, like MLAs and certain people who could explain the bill to me instead of going on TV and talking about how we're going to change the national anthem for gender reasons, right?
Okay,
so why
who's
is our
your
Prime
member,
Minister
who's your
voicing
member of parliament? Who's your member of parliament?
I couldn't tell you. That's the exact thing.
Okay, so
How many people?
Like you
but-
can't point
That's
at
on
other
you,
people.
right?
Then
But
call your
I'm-
member of parliament and ask them to explain the
Yeah.
climate change policy to you.
Okay. I'm thinking there's a question here somewhere that I'm not communicating properly, which is, I guess, people are inherently lazy. In my opinion, people are inherently lazy, and they will do the least amount that they can. You've seen here. I'm talking about it, right? I'm doing it as we speak, and having something that is a process of going, like you said, people don't use websites anymore, right? Does the government of Alberta have an app? Why is it not more widely spread if it is? Why is there
An app for what?
how can we ease access to the information? I guess because a big problem for me is I'm not educated on a lot of this stuff because it's not there in my face like everything else is.
But it
like
is
a lot of the
available.
stuff that we.
But it's available.
But could you not make it more available? I guess.
I don't
in terms
know.
of-
Government.ca, climate change plan. Like, it's not that hard. And this is my frustration. It's what as you said, you're doing exactly what I was talking about earlier. Why isn't somebody feeding me? Why isn't somebody taking me by the hand? Why isn't somebody in charge not doing something about this? And it's like, okay, and again, we've talked about so many different topics. I'm not even sure what it is, but there are people doing things, there are governments doing things, there are plans in place for things you care about, but you need to do, did you want somebody, it's like me saying, do you want me to put a hanger on your door so you know that we're talking about this at council tomorrow? Like, do you want me to send you a text? Like, I don't think the Minister of Climate Change is going to text you.
Even that mentality, though, I guess maybe is what I'm thinking, is like, okay, it's clearly up to us at some point to take the initiative on ourselves to educate ourselves on the issues that we're concerned about, right? But why can it not also be on the other side to continue to better the way that this information is translated and the, effectiveness of it? Yeah. To your point, governmentofalberta.ca, right? Well, how can we take the governmentofalberta.ca issues and give it to people who don't have Wi-Fi and Sundry, right? The people who care about these issues, the people whose businesses are being affected by these issues, and we can't get on the internet to go look at them.
So,
right?
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, right now, we live in a world where we're competing for attention. As a business owner, we're competing for attention. As any kind of creator, that's essentially what we do, right? And I think when you talk about it being difficult to find stuff, the government has put very little effort into competing for our attention. That's why it's not, like you said, it's not spoon-fed to us, right? Because, the government hasn't, jumped on, they haven't created a vlog or any of these things to feed this information from every aspect, right? And people have become so used to getting all of their information fed or received that way, right?
Well, and immediately too,
right? So it's just where the population has evolved into this goldfish community that kind of just needs to get something in an instant all the time. So to go out of our way to even just go on the website and look up that bill or whatever, we might be interested in, it's easier, again, because we're inherently lazy, it's so much easier to simply, pull out our phone,
a headline,
scroll a little bit, see a few headlines, and maybe we dive a little bit deeper into this or that headline. But that's kind of the extent of the general research, because again, we're constantly being bombarded with so much stuff that because the government doesn't, bombard us as well, and frankly, I don't want that, but maybe that's that's something that needs to happen though to properly.
So have you got the Alberta Live thing popping up in your phone to tell you about what's happening in Alberta around the pandemic? Like, there's just these very generic statements going, the government doesn't blog. Yes, they do. The government doesn't have apps. Yes, they do. The government's not on Instagram. They're not appearing in front of me. Yes, they are. Like, if you're not following them, then you're not going to see it.
Yeah.
So my world, I get all the information I could ever want because that's my world.
Yeah.
And so I'm just saying, I think you're making very general statements about every level of government, and I know you're not attacking me personally by any means, but I get defensive because I'm like, there's just so many platitudes coming out of both of you. It's this never happens, and that never happens, and they don't do this, and they don't do that, and it's like, give me some facts.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying in that sense is, it's more, a lot of the stuff that we may follow it or not, but it's put in our face because somebody is paid to put it in our face. It's just the culture that has become who we are, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's as much as I want to, as a business owner, I want to reach all of these people that might be potential customers for me. As much as the government needs to, or not needs to, but it would be great if the government could reach every single person in Canada. It would be great if there was a mandatory, if you're a Canadian citizen, you are, automatically following the Canadian government Instagram account.
As you download Instagram.
Right?
Like
just
that.
Things like that. But it's just, we're just, my point is we're just in a society where people find it difficult to, we've become goldfish, and it's kind of sad.
Well, and
so try and articulate one sort of more question for me, and then before we close, I'm sitting here looking at one of my favorite fairly lengthy quotes, which I'm going to read to both of you before.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I don't know, is there any other question you want to sort of
Well, I was thinking about that, and I'm just thinking like, I don't want to phrase a question wrongly now because you've intimidated me, Karen.
Oh, wait,
You're pressuring me.
Okay, wait, I have to find this thing too, because that is a great thing. I actually did right. So it really bothers me when so one day a friend said to me, I said, when people say I'm intimidating.
Yes.
And it really bothers me because I don't take that as a compliment.
Yeah.
And it hurts me. And my friend said to me, are you intimidating? Or is that person intimidated by you? Which is basically what you just said. I've intimidated you. You are not responsible for someone else feeling less than.
Sorry, I'm intimidated by you, Karen. How dare you?
Because people,
Well,
and you're right. That's a very different statement than calling me intimidating.
Yeah.
That's actually appropriately phrased.
Well, and here's an opinion for you, right? So when I say you're intimidating, for me as a person, am I telling you that you're coming off intimidating, or that you are intimidating me, right? So even that just shows how poor communication can cause little issues, right? And how can we solve? And this is not a question for you, but how can we solve these issues on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, which seems to be where the majority of conversations happening, especially with this pandemic? When we haven't even began to dive into any of the real issues, like and how we could solve them in 2 hours of conversation, right?
We're just having a conversation. Okay, go back to trying to craft your question, and let me assure you, you can't word it incorrectly. I just need to be able to answer it.
What? Okay, here I'll offer you a really open question. Where do we go from here in Karen Sorensen's opinion?
Yeah.
You mean for your business?
No. In terms of a population, as a whole, with the issues and the turmoil and all these different topics that we talked about.
This is also
what is your general advice, I guess, from a position in leadership?
So this is also going to sound like a platitude, but I really believe this to be true, and I alluded to it previously in this conversation. You need to decide for yourself as an individual what you can do to better the world. For me, it was public service in an elected position. I believe that I have had a positive impact on the community I live in. Maybe not everybody does, but I believe I've had a positive impact on the community I live in. Did I have a positive influence on the community down the road? Maybe a little bit. Did I have a positive community in Halifax? Probably not. Am I going to have a positive influence in Bangkok? Probably not. But you know what? I feel as an individual and as a person and as a mom and as a wife, I've done the best I can for me. I don't want to leave this earth not thinking that I just didn't have a positive place somewhere. And I'll still say my greatest accomplishment is raising 3 fine men. And that in fact is enough. But I do think that this is a life of service, what I do, and it doesn't actually matter what you do. I don't care where you work, what job you have, whatever. We are all in service, because the only thing that keeps the world going around and the economy moving is people serving other people, and they're being, at this point, cash exchanged, although that's changing as well.
Yeah.
So, we're all in service. I don't use that as a word that, only politicians or public servants are, but again, being in service, some people think that's such a subservient comment, and it's not. We're all in service. And I just really would encourage you or anybody else who's listening to look at your very, very, very tiny place on this earth and do the best you can, because you can get success there.
Yeah.
And if you take yourself where we're going in terms of trying to solve global issues, it doesn't, I know it's incredibly frustrating, but you will drive yourself crazy trying to do that. But I think you can have a lot of fulfillment in doing small things, be it for you independently or for your family or for the community that you're building.
Okay, here's a good question. To what degree do you think that those issues would solve themselves if each individual just focused on exactly what you were talking about and being the best version of themselves and doing the most to help, right?
Yeah.
How many of those problems would solve themselves?
Probably a lot of them.
So
Probably a lot of them, because if every individual on Earth picked whatever their cause was it, fresh water or world hunger or climate change or, racism or any of the topics that have come up, if every human being on this earth did something for one of those causes, I think it would have a massive positive impact.
and I think it's something bigger than yourself, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Do something bigger than you, and you
Yeah.
will have an impact,
Yeah.
right? So
I'm going to leave you with my Theodore Roosevelt speech.
let's do it.
I want to hear it.
Teddy.
Okay. So it's called The Man in the Arena.
Or woman.
This is my-
Or woman, okay.
Well, Theodore talked about a man in the arena. So, this is a favorite comment of quote of mine.
Yeah.
I think it's relevant to what we've talked about, and I think it's relevant a little bit around the conversation around who's doing what. So it's and again, we've had a lot of conversation around people being critical.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm just going to criticize anything and everything because I disagree.
And we've been critical ourselves.
Correct. Here you go. It is not the critic who counts, not the one who points out how the strong man stumbled, or how the doer of deeds might have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred with sweat and dust and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause, who, if he wins, knows the triumph of high achievement, and who, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. So get into the arena.
Well said.
Nice.
Well
It's
said,
great.
Karen.
I love it.
I like it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Anyway, if you Google Theodore Roosevelt's Man in the Arena, you'll find it. It sits on my desk all the time.
Perfect.
That's a beautiful quote. And I'm going to do some justice. We're going to have you back on here again, and I'm going to have a million questions written down with
sources.
No, I think you're
I'm going to get Nielsen data. I'm going to have pages of Nielsen data. We're going to go through a slideshow. You're going to get the whole thing.
Give me data.
Yeah.
No, I do. I think your format for this podcast is good. I think you
Yeah.
should. I think again, back to authenticity, right? And
Mhm.
as I think about lessons learned in this job, authenticity is definitely a winning hand these days. There's just, most people aren't comfortable in their own skin, and so when they see people who are comfortable in their own skin, it's actually quite attractive to them because it's not a normal state of mind. And people say, like, somebody asked me the question the other day, how do you be so authentic? And I'm like, well,
If you have to try, you're not being authentic.
If I have to try to be authentic, then I'm actually not being authentic. So I think that's a really interesting question. It took me a bit by surprise. Like, how do you be authentic? Well, I've tried never to learn to not be authentic. So anyway,
Yeah.
I find that interesting. But no, so I think this kind of format is very authentic.
Yeah.
I think it's
Awesome.
a good format.
I love it.
That's
We'll have to have you back on, and hopefully everybody that tuned in tonight, because we had a bunch of people tune into the Facebook Live as well.
Okay.
So yeah, we had a bunch of people
What did I
talking.
say?
You had no idea you were criticizing me in front of all my Facebook friends. No, that's totally
I
fine.
don't want to read the comments
No,
now. Man,
that's-
she took him down.
That's one thing we don't do is read the comments. So
Yeah, no, you shouldn't. Really, it's a good plan. No, you guys are great. I'll be interested to hear more about what you're doing. Hopefully, we can have dinner soon or
Yes,
something.
yeah.
We'll see you and Ali up in Banff sometime. But bring Adam along and we'll hang out.
I love it.
Yeah,
As
it's
we
great. Great to meet you. Thanks for
Yeah,
joining
you too,
us.
Adam. You take care.
This was
Clearly,
awesome.
he's the chatty one, eh? Like,
Yeah,
are
I know.
are
You should, if you listen to any of our other ones, it's kind of like Cole goes on a quick rant. I kind of steer it in a direction.
Adam
and he
has to
keeps
stop
going.
me. Yeah, I'm the engine and
Well-
he's at the steering wheel. So
I think too, because we have a personal relationship, I think it just became, probably just flowed a little bit
Oh, it's
better.
good.
And Cole's way, Cole's very comfortable with me as he should be, so it's all
No.
good. Anyway, that was fun. I enjoyed it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Nice to meet
guys.
you too.
Awesome. Thank you,
Take care.
Karen.
Awesome.
Take care. Bye bye.
All right, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it.